let's clear this up. Let's clear this up on the podcast. Let's talk about the high intensity training principles. This is going to be a video all by itself. Break that down for the listeners in the most simple way and in the most organized way that you can do on the spot.
Okay, that's a great question. So high intensity training principles, okay, it involves giving an extreme effort, a momentary muscular effort at the very end of a set of any exercise with an attempt to stimulate the muscle as much as possible, keeping it on the target muscle groups. So you're not changing the form just to cheat out more reps. High intensity training principles involve taking each set, which generally is the minimum number of sets, starting off with one. After you're done warming up, one working set. Why one? Because it's a make sense place to start. You'll know rather quickly if the one set is working or not. You'll know rather quickly within a month or 2 months. Is it working? If it is, stick with it. Training to momentary muscular failure, at least. If it's not, you can justify doing 2 sets. There you go. Now, I would prefer, before you jump to doing 2 sets, that you generally look at intensifying it even more by going beyond just momentary muscular failure. That's concentric or positive failure. For those who don't know, you can look up the word concentric. Going to the point where you cannot lift the weight any longer in really, really good form. That's the signal. There's a difference between volitional failure and momentary muscular failure. This is the whole lesson right here. Volitional failure is you're in the middle of a set, you're pressing the weight up, and all of a sudden it gets kind of hard. You're on rep number 9, and you go, all right, I got one more in me. Number 10 goes up, and you get it, and you go, that was it. I don't think I can do 11, and you rack it. That's volitional. You voluntarily are giving the thought to yourself that I don't have another rep in me. But we've seen many times when I'm sitting there yelling at a client, no, you got one more. Get it, go for it. And then they come down for number 11 like this, and they're not sure it's coming up. And then up, and they barely get it. And I go, now give me one more. And they go down with it, and they get stuck halfway up, and I might take a fingertip and help them through just to rack it. Or if we're in a power rack, I let them fail, momentary muscular failure, remember? And then they rack it. So the second principle would be as few sets as possible, training to at least momentary muscular failure, at least. Volitional failure allows you to train with 2, 3, and 4, and 5 sets of an exercise because you're holding back, and the latest term is reps in reserve. You're holding back. If you say to me, oh, I wasn't going to be able to get the next rep, my first thing to you is how do you know? You didn't even try. The exceptions, squats, deadlifts. I've said it earlier in our interview, right? Those are the exceptions because you're balancing a weight on your back. Just go to the point where you hit volitional failure. It's getting dangerous. Rack it. Do another set if you want. Deadlift, same thing, okay? So the principles. Once it hits that point where concentric failure is just keeping you at a level field, a level that's not improving any longer, prior to even choosing to add another set, I would have clients start doing forced reps, maybe 1 or 2 forced reps, negatives, maybe 1 negative at the end of a set of an exercise when they're fully warmed up and engaged, and they've taken a set to positive failure. They can't get one more rep like this. And what do? I help them up with it. So on the bench press goes up, and then I say, all right, now fight it on the way down. Don't worry, I'll lift it off of you with you. Don't worry, fight it. And they come down, slowly, and they take that full negative like that, rather than racking it. So it does 2 things. It extends the set time under tension, but it's also a different kind of tension because your muscles aren't capable of even doing a concentric at that point. They may not even be capable of stopping the weight on its way down towards your chest. All they can do is lower it under control. So now we're into eccentric training. So these are just some of the ideas and some of the principles. I go over them in my courses. The listener or the viewer can check my channel out in these next few months. We're in the middle of filming right now. They're coming. So I would like to see people, generally speaking, a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle, which we know. But as you advance, for you to progress even further with high intensity training, what worked a year ago or 2 years ago won't necessarily stimulate new muscle today. So you have to get a little bit more intense about it and use certain techniques here and there. Maybe it's using pre-exhaust. I mentioned earlier in the podcast about doing an isolation exercise immediately followed by a compound movement to really get at that target muscle, a curl followed by a chin-up. Well, your biceps are going to be fried once you're done with the chin-ups. You've done curls prior to that, isolating the bicep. So there's different ways of intensifying those workouts. And as you get bigger and stronger, in order for you to continue to progress, you're going to have to get more intense. There's the third principle. You're going to have to get more intense about it. So there's no going back to the very beginning, easy workouts, or just training to concentric failure, unless you're taking a period where you're purposely doing just concentric failure. Maybe you're on a diet, maybe you're getting ready for a show, in which case Dorian Yates admitted as much. He said, and I know it to be true myself, the last few weeks before the show, you don't belong doing anything but training to concentric failure. Any more than that is getting really risky and dangerous. So there's that. Or you can take a certain time of the year to maybe bump the weights up and only train to concentric failure, a little bit more of a power phase. You got to realize, Kenny, I'm 40 years into this now. You have to have some variation. You have to be able to pull out the encyclopedia and inject some kind of entertainment value into this game. Otherwise, you're going to get bored. You're not going to hold out. You're not going to train as hard as you get older. And that's just not fun.
Your routine now, let's talk about that. You're 59, you have no desire to compete, at least not anytime in the near future, right? Okay, for the reasons you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, what does your routine look like now for someone who has a family, who's focusing on business, who still wants to look good, which I'm sure that's still a priority, right? You want to keep your physique looking solid, right? Like you could compete if you wanted to. Let's talk about that. What does that look like now?
Yeah, that's a great question, because